Well, let's crack out the champagne and celebrate, because the number of people with jobs has gone up. Except, of course, barely anybody can afford champagne, given that the real value of pay has shrunk to the lowest level in 2 decades. Nobody, that is, except all the fat cats and execs. Because something else has happened since the last time the economy dramatically hit the skids in the 1970s. Today, chief execs in the UK are paid an average 759% more than their employees, making the wage gap in Britain one of the biggest in all major economies. In fact, 90% of them pocketed 165 times more than a nurse, 140 times more than a teacher, and 132 times more than a copper. That is just immoral. The people who will wipe their arses in old age and keep them safe are scraping around trying to afford the supermarket shop, while these bosses are living the sort of lives most people could never even dream of. So I do actually have some sympathy with strikers when they are real people who toil all day in laborious jobs to then barely be able to feed their kids, while their bosses sit in air-conditioned offices and get ferried to fancy dinners and to setting up trust funds for theirs. And yet, we've all been sold some kind of lie that it has to be this way, that the brightest and the best wouldn't work here if that gap was closed to a more decent level. Well, the thing is, there are plenty of brilliant people around, whereas when it comes to sheer greed, in my mind, that makes you one of the worst. Even halving that gap would still see the average exec take home 2 million quid a year. Especially when people are in charge of services for the people, paid for by the people, a little bit of proportion and humility wouldn't go amiss. I'm not saying we start paying execs a pittance, but when someone is in charge of trains but only knows first-class everything, or is running hospitals but doesn't have relatives stuck in deadly NHS queues, or is imposing hosepipe bans but has a swimming pool in their own back garden, it's hard to imagine that they really do get what life is like at the sharp end. And let's be straight, money corrupts. Unbridled wealth often imbues a sense of entitlement that sees overpaid yobs who kick footballs go about kicking cats and crashing cars and abusing women, acting as though they are untouchable. But if ludicrous sums weren't paid, all the best players would leave the Premiership. So what? Maybe then the average fan could afford a ticket to the terraces and we'd have a better off mettle of player. When people are earning so much money, they frankly don't even know how to spend it all, ensuring their kids will never have to lift a finger, while others are on the brink of suicide, worrying how to even feed theirs. We have a problem. So yes, tax the bonuses of bankers. Yes, cap the salaries of publicly paid execs at a ratio of their lowest paid worker. Yes, throw a huge chunk of tax on houses bought by foreigners, pricing ordinary people out of the market. And yes, when using taxpayers' money to bail out the country in a crisis, make sure it goes to those who need it and not those who don't. Because I'd rather live in a country that values aspiration and humanity, rather than one that makes our nation a magnet to those who want to live in unfettered greed, and that becomes the sordid backbone of our crumbling economy.